as your pets and then kind of selling them off to the trade of hunting because you can get some good money for them. And that's what really it's boiling down to over here.
It's almost like a betrayal to these animals. The other part that I thought was interesting about this is that you described the way in which the lions are killed, and that you had recommended that if they're going to be hunted, that they're killed, that they're shot in the head versus several shots into the body, because it's the most humane way to do it.
Yeah, well, quite rightly so. I mean, the debate continues as to the area size that a lion should be released in before it's hunted, and all of these kind of things. But quite frankly, it's inconsequential whether you release a lion in an area of 5 meters squared or 2,000 hectares, because ultimately anyone coming to hunt that animal is going to find it. And, the trophy hunters paid a large sum of money. So in the actual instance, it's probably better for the lion, as I mentioned, to be shot in the 5 meter squared enclosure, because at least you know that this hunter is actually, and I use the term hunter very loosely because these are not hunters. This is like clubbing seals. It's like shooting fish in a pond. These guys come out, and I'd rather have them shoot a lion in a 5 meter squared enclosure than 2,000 hectares where they nick it and wound it and the animal goes along suffering for the next 2-3 days. But the head versus the body shot, the reason they do that, they use a heart-lung shot, is because it doesn't ruin the trophy. So it's really quite sick if you start to analyze.
Yeah, it really was disturbing to read that. And I understand that the lion population has dropped from 350,000 to almost 25,000 in 20 years?
Yeah, absolutely correct, yeah. Quite staggering. And I actually did a little calculation the other day because somebody asked me when I started working with lions, what was my estimate of the lion population. And in actual fact, when I started working with lions, which was about 12 years ago, the population was probably sitting at about 120,000. So since I've been working with lions, it's dwindled down to 25,000.
God.
That's sad.
Is that from farming, or that's just wide-scale killing of them?
The biggest factor affecting lions in the wild, in the world, or in Africa, is human encroachment. Quite plainly put, human encroachment. People are encroaching on the wild territories, and the lions have no place to go. So basically, they're breaking out of parks, and ultimately the consequence is they get shot because they either become livestock raiders or they're deemed a threat, a problem animal, and ultimately they get annihilated. If they are raiding cattle and sheep and stuff like that, the local people are going to poison them or shoot them anyway. So number one factor towards the demise of lions is human encroachment. People will tell you hunting and disease and all of that. Yeah, it has an effect, but not quite as an effect as people.
Very interesting. You also write that these animals pick up intent, our fear, our innocence. They pick up everything. And that one of the things that people do when they get near these animals is that they try to control it and they try to bring it into their space. They kind of encroach on the animal's space.
Quite right. As I mentioned in the book, that's quite a complicated thing to describe. But quite right. That was what I didn't want to do, is I didn't want to be in a situation where I was another one of these animal people. I mean, let me just first say, there's a reason why people are interested in the way I interact with them, because I said to somebody the other day, but I'm not the first person on the planet to interact with lions. And they were saying, yeah, but you're not the first, but it's the way you interact with them, Kevin. And it's really that. I don't dominate them. I let them welcome me into their space. And once you're welcomed into that space, there's no better interaction to have with an animal. To lie down with a lion, to be in between his legs, to be in the most vulnerable positions where he could kill you really with one bite to the back of the neck when you're just literally lying there with your neck in his mouth. It's the most honorary position to be in. And it all boils down to that. So, allowing them to be what they are, the lions, not trying to control them, letting them be lions. It's an amazing thing.
What we found out today with quantum physics in the area of telepathy also should lend tremendous credibility to the work that you're doing with the animals. Because
Absolutely.
We can no longer question, does telepathy exist? And that has to be part of the quotient of connection between you and the animals.
Exactly that. I mean, I think it's because people like to, obviously box me and say, well, you're the lion guy or whatever, or the hyena or the predator guy. But it truly does translate to other animals, as you just said.
I think it's interesting, too, that a lion's power is in its claws and that those claws are serrated. I didn't know that. I don't think a lot of people knew that.
The actual back of the tooth, the claws are not serrated per se, very sharp. The power is in the claws. Most of the damage that occurs to you when a lion smacks you are caused by a lion with its claws. That's why I feel it's so unnecessary for people to go along declawing these animals. They use their claws literally like fingers. What a lot of people don't know is the actual canines of a lion. It's got a little ridge on the back of the tooth, especially on the younger animals. Obviously, as they grow older and their teeth wear down, these serrations wear down like they would on a knife that's overused. But definitely on the back of the tooth, this ridging is almost serrate like a knife, and it obviously helps, when they suffocate their prey.
You talk about that there's no wild area in South Africa, which I thought was fascinating. You said there's national parks, so there's managed areas, but it's not wild like the way we may be perceiving that. Can you explain that?
Yeah, quite right. Even our flagship park, which is really huge. I mean, and most people will think I'm crazy by making a statement like that, but, our Kruger Park, which is probably the size of England, it's quite a massive area. Most people would go, well, wow, that's wild enough. Why I make that statement is that within the Kruger Park itself, we are always having to intervene and manage the animals. We've got the problem at the moment of the elephants. Do we cull them or don't we? Now, if an area is truly wild, you don't have to intervene. The ecosystem is in balance, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion about whether or not you cull elephants. The other issue is all these lions that are forever breaking out of the parks, breaking out of the wild. I mean, they shouldn't be breaking out of the wild because they shouldn't be contained. So the mere fact that, we as people have put fences up means we are obviously impacting on the natural ecosystem, which in turn means that there is management needed. So for various parks, Kruger Park needs a different kind of management style as it would at, for instance, my park, which is only, 1,000 hectares. So the point I was trying to make is that as soon as humans intervene, there is this management that needs to come with it. And not everyone is always going to like what that management tool is, especially when it comes to the management of animals by having to cull them.
And you also make a distinction between domesticated animals and wild animals that are born into captivity, and you want that very clear.
I mean, lions that are born into captivity are a different breed, really, in my opinion, to what I've seen in my career of animals that have been brought into captivity from the wild. That, for me, I've seen it, I've experienced it, it is absolute craziness. It's a no-no. Whereas the animals that are like 50th, 60th generation living in captivity do adapt to this kind of lifestyle. It doesn't mean that we must put them in a box, give them fresh food and water and throw away the key and think we're doing a good job. It's more to it than that. But I just feel they do adapt a lot better to, when I see that people have taken animals from the wild and stuck them in a cage or in captive situations. That's crazy.
I would imagine that would be very similar to humans as well.
Well, absolutely. I often draw the analogy between taking lions in a zoo, for example, and people in prison, and you tell me the difference. You tell me that those people in prison have a quality of life, except the only difference really being that people in prison were put there for a reason. The lions, on the other hand, or the other animals for that matter, didn't ask to be put there.
This part of you that knows when and how far to push the barriers, don't you think that part of you has kept you alive?
That's a very good question, because actually I was asked the other day, what is the gift that you think you have, with these animals? So I went away and I pondered over it, and I don't think so much it's the gift of interacting with the animals, but moreover the gift of knowing when to leave them alone. That's what's kept me alive. And believe you me, yes, these animals are unpredictable. I would say yes to all of the questions that are fired at me. However, over the years, knowing the animals as well as I do and knowing when to leave them alone, it's not even a question of, oh, well, you're going to meet a lion on a bad day and he's going to take your head off. I would approach an enclosure or an animal and know immediately. I don't need to go up to him to pat him on the nose. He's already given me those telltale signs a million miles away, and it's up to me to either listen to those signals or choose to ignore them.
And don't you think that's also developed in you on a deep level over time, once you're resonating and you're willing to see and you're willing to receive where that animal's at versus just walking in your own bubble?
100%. I mean, that's the crux of it, is developing that and honing it over time.
You went to England and were doing personal training there. You were helping people get into shape. And you really didn't have a good time in England and went back to South Africa, which changed the course of your life. Talk a little bit about that.
It's amazing how things happen in your life, and you don't know